How to structure the first candidate interview. If you're not an HR or recruiter who has been trained to interview, maybe you're a farm owner or a hiring manager who hasn't had a lot of interviewing experience, you might feel like you're just winging it when you're interviewing candidates. I'm Lila here with AgHires to give you some tips on structuring that interview so it flows nicely and you can get the most out of your time with the candidate. In the very start of the interview, when the candidate arrives, you want to start with, introductions, handshaking, and some light small talk to break the ice and get that candidate comfortable before you get started. Then, as the interviewer, you want to spend the first few minutes telling that candidate a little bit more about your company and a nice overview of the position if you haven't already. Next, you want to spend some time getting to know the candidate's background and resume. You really want to spend some time here. You want to ask them to walk through their resume or walk through their background and explain their transitions from one role to the next. Once they are finished doing that, you can ask any follow-up questions or specific questions about their experience or their resume. Then you can move on to the more in-depth questions and behavioral style questions. When it comes to your list of interview questions, you really want to start with the more basic ones and ease into the more difficult questions. So here you might start asking more job specific or technical questions and then go into those behavioral questions like tell me about a time when you failed and what you learned from it. After you as the interviewer finish up with your questions, you'll want to ask the candidate if they have any questions for you. Hopefully they did show up with a list of questions or at least thought of some while you were interviewing. Once you answer their questions and finish any final thoughts and conversation, you want to close out the interview by letting that candidate know the next steps in the process and when they can expect to hear from you. Thank them for their time, shake their hand, and lead them out. This structure is a good baseline for either an in-person interview or a virtual or phone interview. Another tip for that first interview is making sure it's conducted in the right setting or environment. If the job's on the farm, for example, you might consider doing the interview in the shop or walking the fields. You still want to fit in the same, general questions and structure, but you really want to make sure you're interviewing that candidate in an environment that makes sense and fits the role if you want to get the most out of it. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow AgHires for more ag industry hiring and HR tips.